Hello everyone, this is V, and today we are going to talk a little more in depth about ideological pressure and the unhappiness that results from that. We will do this in three stages. First we will discuss where it's coming from, then we will see how we can minimize the impact of this, and finally we are going to talk about when it is correct to switch ideologies. So these are the different stages that we will be going through. And to start off with, I will be buying 3 factories so that we can choose an ideology. Because before you have chosen an ideology, there really is no danger uh, at all. But once you have one, things start to get interesting. And as we can see, the Shoshone have adopted freedom, which means that we will pick something else so that we can immediately see what the effects of influence are and how that functions. Oh, there we go, we can adopt an ideology, and as you can see, all of them have been adopted by someone. I will go for autocracy just to show uh, how that works, and I will take well, whatever mobilization. It's not important. And then we are going to look at our tourism and our culture, and this is done in the culture overview. There are 4 tabs here. This one is the one you will be most familiar with, I think. It shows you where your great works are. We will talk more about them later, but this is where you can see how your cities generate culture and tourism. My apologies. You can swap them. This is all part of the culture game. And then there is this screen, and these are the two that we will be talking about, and we will start with this one. Here you can see who is generating how much tourism and what ideology they have. Now, if your ideology is different, you will be getting these little hammers there, or torches I must say, and they indicate the amount of ideological pressure that is going on in that civilization. And as you can see here, the Huns have dissidents because they are influenced by the Shoshone, who have freedom and they themselves are order. And these dissidents produce -7 happiness. You can see here how much the unhappiness weighs for. It's 1 per city or 1 per 10 points of population, and the worst is what you get, so this can ramp up pretty quickly. And this number can be quite important. The question, of course, is, as usual, how do we get these torches? And I think we have to go to the next turn to see how that works, because I think it only applies a turn later. There we go. Very well. We, Indonesia, are content. We are influenced by the Shoshone with a torch for freedom and with a sword for autocracy. So that means that we end up at exactly 0, I think. And how that works is a consequence of this screen over here. As you can see, because our tourism is low, we have no influence on any civ, whereas the Shoshone are exotic on us, and in Greece, you will see, is also exotic on us. And it is the difference between your influence on them and their influence on you that determines the pressure that they exert on you. So, because the Shoshone are exotic on me, they exert one torch, and because I am nothing on them, I exert, well, nothing. If I were exotic, then the Shoshone were exotic on me, so we are both at exotic levels on each other, then the torch will fall away. Conversely, for Greece, they are exotic on us, and we are nothing on them, so they pressure us for autocracy. And that means that their influence on us sort of protects us against that of the Shoshone. Of course, that means you are very dependent on another civilization, but that is not the worst thing that can happen. Although it's always better to just stand on your own, because you never really can tell what other civilizations will be doing. For example, if Greece were to get conquered or decided that they were happier in another ideology, well, that would be unfortunate. That means that if you follow the tourism leader, you are usually going to be set, and you probably won't need to worry much about the ideologies. But it also means that you kind of have to wait with building factories in order to choose your ideology. Now, the problem with this is not that single torch, but this stacks up. It stacks up both from multiple civilizations and from higher levels of influence. So, if Greece gets to familiar or influential, then their amount of influence over me will increase, and the same goes for the Shoshone. If the Shoshone got to, say, influential, they would get, I think, 2 or 3 torches over me, and that means that my unhappiness because of our ideological difference will increase. So instead of, like the Huns here, they have 1 torch going on them, it would be minus 21 or something, because they got 3 torches. And that is quite a problem. As you can see, this can stack up really quickly, especially if you have a very powerful civ against you. And there are other factors like a world ideology, which also provide torches or swords. I think the torch stands for freedom, the sword for autocracy, and the hammer is for order. Though I could be mistaken, but I think that's how it is. And you always have to see how the balance between them is, which can get out of hand really quickly. Because it also cascades. Say you have Greece here with 12. They are probably reasonably influenced by Germany. Let's check that out. Yeah, they are exotic over a few civilizations, even familiar over Persia. Say that Germany got an ideology and they chose to go freedom, and well, the Shoshone will be happy with them, so their torches are now added up, their influence is added up, so that will mean I get 2 torches and later perhaps 3, That also means that Persia is very vulnerable because they are under familiar influence. And remember, well, they are under familiar influence by Germany, so that's 2 torches. Let's check the Shoshone. They are under exotic influence by the Shoshone. That's 3 torches. And then we check Persia's influence. They have none, so that's minus nothing. So that means that they are under 3 torches of ideological pressure, which means that it's very important for them to also go freedom. And then their pressure is of course added to that of all the autocracy civilizations. So it's not just strength in civ, but it's also strength in numbers. Well, Persia is obviously not going to do anything with 0 tourism, but if it were another civilization with tourism output, that would make quite a difference. So this can cascade, often it cascades in the direction of order, because many civilizations prefer to go order, but it can be going either way, and you can enforce it yourself. So very important to remember, the amount of ideological pressure is determined by the difference of your influence on them versus their influence on you. So both tourism and culture are going to be very important. Now, how do you get to such a level of influence? That's actually a reasonably complicated calculation. Or, well, it's not all that complicated, but you kinda have to know it. So let's go back to Persia. No, Germany. You can see here the total culture of a civilization gathered over the course of its history. And then this line here is the total amount of tourism that the chosen civ has exerted over that civilization. As you can see, Germany has put out 988 tourism to Babylon, and they have a total of 5,373, modified by 40% per turn. Well, this is 40% on their tourism output, which means that they are exotic at 18.4%. Slowly rising, so the tourism percentage is rising faster than the culture gain of Babylon. Which means that in not too long a time they will be familiar over them. That means that to defend you can increase your culture output, but you can also just increase your tourism output. They're usually interconnected. And you can defend yourself by denying the opponent open borders and trade routes. Religion is often not that easy, but definitely open borders is something you have a lot of control over. There is also the option to put a spy into the opposing camp, and you get a penalty if your ideologies are different. So you have a natural defense against the tourism of other ideologies. I think also 25%, though I could be mistaken, but I think it's 25. That kind of brings us to the second part, of course. So to recapitulate, if that's even a word, the difference between tourism and culture, your tourism and the opponent's culture, determines the influence level, and the difference between influence level between you on them and they on you determines the ideological pressure, which results in 1 torch for the Shoshone on the Huns. Let's go to the Shoshone. They are exotic on the Huns, and the Huns are nothing on the Shoshone. As soon as the Huns reach exotic, the torch on them will go away, and so will the unhappiness. Alright, on to phase 2. How do we prevent this unhappiness from taking over? Well, as you can see in this screen, if your public opinion is against you, you can change ideology. Which means that, of course, the torches you see here are going to change. Because if I were to switch to freedom, then the influence of the Shoshone would be positive and the influence of Greece would be negative, reverse from what it is now. And that means that I might gain a bonus or a penalty to my happiness depending on how that works out. So, well, switching ideologies can sometimes save you from a huge amount of unhappiness, but, well, it's not ideal. If you change your ideology, you will lose 2 of these tenets, which is an extremely high cost. These are worth a tremendous amount of culture, and you generally never want to have to do that. And even if you do, it might not save you because it means that you have invested too little of your resources into happiness and culture and tourism. And that probably isn't a good thing. In general, if you are playing a culture game, you will never ever be having trouble with your public opinion because you will be generating so much culture and so much tourism that your pressure on the opponents will almost always be higher than the other way around. But when you are playing a military, a science game, an economical game, then this becomes a very important choice and it must be weighed very carefully. And in general, there are 2 really strong ways to protect yourself. And the first one is happiness. As usual, happiness is very much the key. Gaining happiness, there are multiple methods, but when choosing an ideology, unlike what I just did now, it's almost always the best to go with a few happiness policies early on if you think that your influence will become an issue. Because this public opinion can be minus whatever, as long as you stay happy, it's not really a problem. It will not affect you in any way other than just reducing your global happiness. So that kind of means that if you take a few happiness policies, well, it only needs to be 1 or 2 and you should be well protected. What you must remember, however, is to do this ahead of time, because once you hit the unhappiness, it kinda hits you in the face really quickly. You can go from +10 to -10 in just 1 turn because another civ becomes influential over you. Now, if you do have to change ideology, you will go through 2 turns of chaos. You will not produce anything and you will lose all your culture. So I would lose those 375 saved up, as well as produce 0 for several turns, and then it changes, but it's very easy to then be influenced by someone else in a negative way because they are now influential over you. And especially if they themselves have to switch, then suddenly the pressure changes entirely. So you never ever want to do this, and to cover that you just want to make sure that you have spare happiness. As you can see here, you know ahead of time how much unhappiness will be generated. So just count it, and it's 1 per 10 pop. So let's count 35, 45, and 61, so it will be 6, maybe 7 unhappiness per excess torch. So at the moment I don't have enough, but with say 14 or 15 happiness I would be very well protected against influence fluctuations, and that would be quite enough to protect myself for the rest of the game, I think. So when you are around this level of happiness, you might want to get another tenet that gives you happiness. Doesn't matter if it's from the ideological tenets, though they give the most. You can take happiness from monarchy or liberty or commerce, just the same. It will all help you stay with your head above the water. You also definitely do not need to panic if you go below 0 happiness because of ideological pressure, because it does fluctuate a lot, and as long as you can fix it within a reasonable amount of time, it's not the worst. You definitely only want to switch ideologies if you are forced to, and then I mean absolutely forced to, like going minus 15 and with no new policy in sight or no new happiness policies available. That would be a good moment to switch ideologies. The second way to protect yourself is, of course, following the tourism leader. For example, if we look here at Germany, they have 26. If I had waited and looked at Germany and seen what ideology they were going for, I could have followed them, and they probably exert enough influence on the rest of the people that, well, on me especially, that that becomes a good enough choice to follow. Still, even if you follow a tourism leader, I would always recommend going for happiness policies, because they allow you to survive. Well, they do everything for you. They allow you to survive ideological pressure. They allow you to conquer when needed, because as you can imagine, conquering cities becomes quite painful. If you have to pay one more unhappiness for each 10 population, then conquering this is 2 extra, and conquering this is 2 more extra, and this is 1 more extra, all on top of the normal unhappiness. So I would gain 5 additional unhappiness just for conquering Babylonia. So when you are in conquest mode, you definitely want to have spare happiness. But in general, it's never bad to take happiness policies first, because they are usually the best. They can buffer you up, and unless you have 20 plus, then you might need that at some point, because things get banned sometimes, and sometimes in a war they get pillaged. So having a little buffer is okay. And again, as I said, going into the orange here is really not that bad of a thing, as long as your cities are large enough. You are already in the late game. If having 1 extra pop for a few turns will not matter all that much, especially not compared to losing 2 turns of anarchy. You do not want to do that. So that's also very important. And then the final thing that you must realize that is very important is the guilds. You want to build your guilds as soon as possible. I always build my guilds in one city, and there is a good reason for that. I feed that city with food so that I can sleep them all, as you can see here. You want them slotted as soon as possible without sacrificing growth. And the advantage to this is that this city generates a lot of culture. As you can see, it's 3 per slot. They will also create more great people, which means that in this city you can build the national epic and in my case a candy, which also increases great people generation, which means that you have this bonus for your entire array of guilds. As you can see, great people plus 10 plus 50% from the city bonuses. And of course, since this is all in one city concentrated and it's your capital, the Hermitage, which grants you plus 50% culture in this city, also counts on the guild culture. As you can see, if I turn one off, I lose 4 and not just 3. In addition, the Hermitage, something you always want to build as soon as possible. You don't have to sacrifice science for it, but, well, you really want to have this. It needs opera houses in all your cities, but it is the much needed dump slot for the great artists, which you don't really have a place for unless you get cathedrals or early musea. But the Hermitage really solves this problem by giving you 3 slots and a good set bonus. So having this is very important, I think more important than having an early Oxford, because that's just something that is, well, Oxford is much more valuable later on and can be saved, while the Hermitage, you really want this early to get more posties and more defense against the influence of alien cultures. Now, as I said before, the 3 guilds should be slotted as soon as possible, but don't give up too much growth for it. And you will sometimes run into situations where you cannot make great works yet. I almost universally keep my great people for later in those cases, just to make great works because they are very important. I will never sacrifice an artist, for example, because I know I will get the Hermitage very early and then I will want 3 works of art in it as soon as possible because of the bonus. This in total gives you, well, the 2 culture from the Hermitage plus the 6 from the great works, that's 8, plus 3 from the set bonus, that's 11, plus 50%, that's 16, and the comparable number of tourism, well, 9 tourism, which is also quite a big deal. So these are very important things. Diplomacy wise, you will probably want to get open borders and deny the opponent open borders to get these bonuses here. Trade routes, you will usually have them anyway, so can't really help much about that. But getting open borders from other stiffs and not giving them away is also a very good way to protect yourself from cultural influence. And once you have found a friend, you might want to give them open borders so they can influence you a bit, though I'm not too keen on that. That also means that if you are going for domination, especially late game domination, like I was going for here, I was planning on conquering the world with airplanes, you will probably want to go crush the leader of the tourism very early on, because they will probably have a lot of wonders and great works. And once you have crushed the tourism leader, you will usually be secured from alien influences. So I think that about covers everything I had to say. Yeah, so tourism output, very important. Culture output, very important. Get open borders from them, deny them open borders to you. Follow the culture leader in ideology if you think you are going to need to, although I usually would prefer to get one myself early on and then get 2 free tenets. With 2 free tenets you can easily take 1 or 2 happiness tenets there, and then you probably don't have to worry. National Wonders happiness is a very good one, since it gives 10 to 12 happiness in your empire. So that's for a tall empire one of the best. Get more happiness wherever you can, and when you are at around 20 you should be secured, unless you are in conquest mode, and well, that's a completely different game of course, but that's not the point of this video. Then finally the question of when to switch, but you should be able to answer this for yourself now. Let me check. If your public opinion unhappiness really far exceeds your happiness that you generate yourself, you may want to switch. If there is no hope of fixing this in the short term, remember that below -10 you are going to get rebels, and below -20 you are going to get to be losing cities, but that means total happiness, not public opinion. You can easily have -100 public opinion as long as your total happiness stays high. That's not really an issue. So you can safely ignore this. This is only an indication of where the problem lies. And I think it's almost always worth fixing your happiness up with other means, other policies. Try to protect yourself, predict when you are going to be in a happiness dip, so that you don't have to change ideologies. And if you do have to change ideologies, try to postpone it as long as possible, unless, well, it is tactically correct of course. But usually, unless it's really deep into the red, you don't want to do this. You want to wait for the extra happiness policy, or that extra luxury, or that, well, extra happiness building that you can create. And that's almost always worth it, because giving up these policies is just such a painful thing to do, as well as giving up 2 turns of all income. You basically never want to do that. So I hope this helped. If you have any questions about ideological pressure that I did not cover, then please feel free to ask if something is unclear. But I think we have gone over everything. One more thing is making archaeologists and having them construct monument things. Don't remember the name. This is also a very good way to increase your culture output, so it's often worth doing. And well, that's pretty much all I have to say. Try to get to exotic level with as many people as possible, because at exotic, the difference between exotic and familiar is so big in how much tourism you have to output, that you usually only reach exotic levels and they reach exotic levels over you. But getting familiar is already very difficult, so if you can get exotic, you will probably be safe. And well, good luck, and hope to see you soon.